Hello everyone, and welcome to this next session from the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight. I've been with RICS for over 10 years now, and I sit in the standards, regulatory and thought leadership part of the organisation. My role is to look at the whole effect of data and technology right across the built and natural environment and how that affects our profession, our members and the stakeholders that work with our members. That's a very broad brief. RICS members operate right across the life cycle of land and property, in residential, in infrastructure and commercial real estate. So it's a hugely broad and interesting area. And one key part of that is our RICS Tech Partner Programme, where we work with various organisations and firms in the data and technology space to highlight the kinds of developments and applications of data and technology right across that broad spectrum and how we can help our members and our profession understand the potential. And I'm really glad this afternoon to have Claudia and Budha from RelAi this afternoon to talk about their platform. So please do join us, Budha and Claudia. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. Well, great to have you on the call this afternoon. What I always ask initially when I talk to a partner, particularly for the first time in these kind of discussions, is really to ask you both to give us a bit of background on your career paths to date that have brought you to create RelAi, and really give us your perceptions on why you set the firm up. So please, perhaps Claudia, if you give us a bit of background on how you've arrived at this point and what RelAi is all about.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me. First of all, Andrew, thank you very much for the opportunity. We basically, the idea of RelAi was born like a few years ago from my experience and from Budha experience. I've been working in real estate for many years. I would say now over 2 decades.
Yeah.
And when I met Budha, we simply put together our experience. He's been working in capital markets for years. So we put together 2 different perspectives of our experiences, basically. So my experience is, as I mentioned, it's in real estate. I am a qualified RICS qualified real estate professional. I've been working across countries. I ran my business for many years. I've been working in Hong Kong. I worked in Azerbaijan. I had projects with the government of Azerbaijan. Then I worked in obviously in Italy. In London, I managed big development for big architectural offices. Yeah. And a big group that I don't want to mention the name, but they were, big group, and I managed their developments in UK and across basically Europe. My experience it's not just in real estate and development, but it's also in transactions. I've been working with banks and with basically the Court of Justice to resolve disputes. So I have quite a clear understanding of how the process works, not just in Italy and in Europe, but also in UK as well. And I also got a second master in real estate from UCL. And this gave me a very deep understanding of the kind of a broad idea of the real estate market, not just let's say in international terms. So the link with UCL, it's very important to me. I also pursuing my PhD in blockchain.
Yeah.
Which is basically the next phase of the startup, and maybe we'll think about it and we'll talk about it a bit more during the call. So now I will give the word to Budha so he can introduce himself.
Indeed, yeah. Thanks, Budha. Tell us about your backstory, if you would.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, 17 years capital markets for me. So I'm an investment banker by profession. So my previous experiences were in Goldman Sachs, UBS, and Deutsche Bank, some of these large investment banks. So we deal a lot with trading platforms. Okay, banks, essentially investment banks, are the intermediaries between borrowers and lenders. If you see what I'm saying, if you get my drift there, and essentially what RelAi is doing is very similar. It's an intermediary. After all, it's a marketplace. It's a platform where buyers and sellers of properties and renovators of properties essentially meet the other side. As in the professionals. So essentially it's a marketplace for real estate. It's one of its kind. We're going to talk about this later. But again, if you think about Claudia's world and my world, coming together as if in a nice synchronized way, and similar to Claudia, I've been also in UCL. I'm one of the industrial professors there. I pursued my doctor, research there. I have an MBA from INSEAD and finance, and I don't want to go on about it, but we are who we are. We have some skills we'd like to think they're transferable. So there you are.
Yeah, no, and I think that's why I always kind of introduce these conversations with this bit of a backstory. It's nothing to be shy about your qualifications, quite the reverse. It's about, I think, highlighting what is often is a strong combination of skills, that there needs to be technology, there needs to be understanding of markets in general, and clearly there needs to be understanding of some of the nuances and idiosyncrasies of the real estate market, because it's not perhaps quite as you would know, it's certainly not as liquid as stocks and bonds and equities. So it has some unusual characteristics, dare I say it.
And Andrew, to your point, I think if you look at the financial markets at the moment, it's been disrupted by technology. The entire value chain is being disrupted, and that's one of those flickering moments, in Claudia's and my life, where we say, okay, if our markets can be disrupted, why can't we disrupt the real estate market? We don't want to disrupt it so far as creating transparency. I thought we wanted to change it, but it looks like we're going to only be able to solve a little bit of problem at a time, and that's going to be more transparency.
I suppose I always prefer the kind of glass half full word of innovation, because I think disruption, that they're perhaps at opposite sides of the same coin, that disruption can be a very positive force in terms of driving innovation. And I suppose it's fair to say that the real estate sector is quite behind other sectors in terms of overall digitization, making markets more transparent, more liquid in that way. So on that theme, perhaps you could tell us basically, what problem is RelAi, I can never pronounce it, what problem is your platform solving, and how does it do it in simple terms?
I'll let Claudia answer that. The way we pronounce it is RelAi. It's real estate and artificial intelligence put together. Reliable, the reliable internet.
Game of word that we wanted to somehow to propose. So RelAi, the problem that we want to solve is basically facilitate real estate transactions. As you know, the buying and selling properties or renovating properties is quite a complex and convoluted process. It's not just me saying that, it's the UK government. There is a survey, there is a call for action that basically came out a few years ago. The paper has been published in the House of Commons Library, so there is a request for a digital solution to solve this problem, because at the moment it's considered as stressful as having a child or getting divorced. Yeah. So there's also a lot of money wasted in a transaction which fails. So 25% of people transactions generally fail. So there is a lot of money wasted in this process. So there was a need for an action and for a solution. So with RelAi, we decided that maybe we can give, we try to give an answer to this problem. So RelAi is basically a marketplace where people who want to buy and sell properties, they can find all the qualified real estate professionals that they need. And I mean qualified with qualification like RICS. So not just anyone who you can find in other platforms. For example, you're going to go through the process, you're going to go through the qualification of the professionals to make sure that everyone works in a trustworthy environment, because we are talking about big transactions, houses and properties. So we want everyone to be comfortable that they're dealing with the right person. So we are giving everyone access to a panel of professionals, and also we are giving a tool which basically can get everyone familiar with the process. So people will understand what they have to do. They can structure the processing tasks. All the documents have been uploaded in the platform, so everyone can see who is doing what they're waiting for. They can download and upload documents, and basically they will know through the platform which stage they are, if they're late, if they're not late, who should be taking action, and they can always talk to each other to speed up the process. This is the main, the core of RelAi. And this is what we are working to give to the market: a transparency, trustworthy environment, and also a faster and cheaper process. Because obviously, if you can shorten the process, there is obviously an advantage in saving money. You can obviously, for everyone, basically, you can close the process faster, and there is less waste of time and money. So I don't know if you would want to add something else to this.
Well, we also have a sustainable angle, Andrew, and I think that's very topical at the moment. As we talk, we have COP26 going on. The world is changing, right? We are in 2021, and irrespective of which government is in power, right? Whether it's the Conservatives or Labour, or whether it's in UK or US or wherever you want to go, we look at RelAi as a sustainable solution. It's not only going to stop the paperwork, a huge amount of paperwork that's going to is going to create digital solutions mainstream. The marketplace helps that way. Also, obviously, we've got Claudia. We have a woman who's leading our company. She's the CEO, and we look at her, we look up to her for her directions, and obviously we have myself and even our CTO. We come from minority backgrounds. We have our chief risk officer, legal officer, Shrey Reiter, who's from Israel. So we think that, and we have our users in Canada, we have our potential users in UK, and we think that in the global, and we created this out of COVID. Okay, so we all obviously had this. We proved this manually for a few years before, but we created. So essentially, long story short, Andrea, I think there is that sustainability angle, as well as we bring in blockchain, as we bring in technology, as we bring in a new way of looking at blockchain led by women, bringing in various talents irrespective of color, caste, creed, and whatnot, to simplify things, solving the public's problem, I think in a sustainable way is what we're looking at as well. I would like to obviously, Claudia, more about how blockchain is going to essentially save quite a few things there, but I'm not going to go into the details of it, but there you are.
No, that's great, and I think it's important to echo that point around that diversity of people we need in real estate now, that we need that diversity of demographics, all those different backgrounds, as you say, to bring the right skill sets. And I do remember talking to somebody many years ago about this whole diversity piece, and he made a very, very, I thought, simple but powerful comment about companies needing to reflect their customers, that that the people that build products and run companies need to reflect the communities they serve. And I think that's a very simple way of explaining why diversity should work. So
our cabinet, I mean, it's a reflection of our society, and these companies such as us, we believe that we're reflective of that. I'll stop there.
In my experience, I've been the only woman in construction, and generally when we come to construction in real estate, I realized that I've always been the only woman in always men. So I decided, okay, we have to do something about that.
So in terms of the technology, without getting into real depth of bits and bytes, what kind of technology are you using under the bonnet, under the hood, as it were, to deliver the platform? Because obviously you've got AI in the name. So what kind of technologies are you using now, and also perhaps you see in the future, to deliver the experience to all the various users and stakeholders on the platform?
Okay, at the moment, RelAi, we are building a minimum viable product, something like basic, but it works to validate the idea with customers and with users. So at the moment, the technology is nothing fancy, it's very functional. The next phase, which is coming from 2022, Q1, we want to start introducing machine learning and artificial intelligence. It's going to be extremely important for us, because what we want to do is to drive and to guide professionals and customers basically in choices. So we can, for example, predict how much a transaction will take in terms of cost and time, and some solutions, some like action. For example, let's say if we have data to prove that, let's say, a transaction can be reduced in time and cost if you have a building surveyor in the first phase, because then maybe you don't get discouraged by defecting the property, the transaction doesn't fail. So we can give a lot of input in an early stage in the transaction to make sure that people take the right choices and educated choice. So this definitely is going to be a very important point. And at the same time, we are trying to implement blockchain. And obviously, this is not going to be done in one go. Blockchain can be introduced by phase, bit by bit. Yeah, we think that there is a huge potential in introducing blockchain because it can really make the transaction faster and more secure. In the first phase, we are thinking to implement element of blockchain to basically improve data security, because we are going to store lots of documents and lots of sensitive data. So we want to make sure that what we use it's stored securely, and it doesn't have a bad impact on privacy and similar things. And also we can use blockchain obviously to make the transaction faster. And in the future, basically, as soon as we get to the third phase that we think could be around 2023, 2024, we want basically for transaction to introduce a smart contracts that basically will automate the process of transactions and payments. So there's not going to be waste of time between basically when the task is finished and when the payment is done. Because we are not talking about in the platform, we are not talking about the transaction of the property. We are talking about transaction between the professionals and the customer. So of course, there's going to be an adjustment. We are going to have to look at the regulation and make sure that we are within the frame of the regulation. But still, we are not talking about a huge change in regulations. And also we have, I'm very proud to say that we are RICS regulated. Yeah. So we really want to bring the highest standard that RICS recommended. So we are really doing everything we can to make sure that the product RelAi is trustworthy, and our customer, professionals and users can basically trust us and be confident that they can do transactions through us.
Indeed, as you said, I think it's very important that standards don't sit outside of the data and technology space. But Budha, what are your thoughts on that?
Just to solve the technicalities, we are currently sitting on a cloud platform, and the front end is going to be very basic in HTML. We are moving it to React, which is much more fancier, I would say. We would have at the moment we're going to have a progressive web app, but going forward we are going to have an app, a standalone app, as well as a website, so you can potentially renovators, as well as my brother is getting his property renovated at the moment. He's going through 20 emails from 20 different vendors, coming in, and he's working, he's doing this and the other, he's got a little child on the way, and the idea is that you simplify that. Idea is you have your phone and you can go in your computer, whichever way you want to you access, communicate, delegate, manage. It's all going to be done from one literally click of a finger. So any message that you want to put, any documents that you want to sign, everything can be done on the go every day, like we do everything else. So that's essentially where we are headed with all the good things that Claudia said. Is we think this is going to be the future.
So for that point of view, you painted the picture there of your brother-in-law, doing that sort of what should be a really simple transaction, shouldn't it? Simply getting in a number of trades and professionals to do some work on a particular asset should be a very simple thing. But as you say, it's very complex at the moment. That's one use case. What are the things that are you seeing as being the typical customers, professional providers that will exist on this marketplace? What's your vision of what that will look like?
I can take that, Claudia, if that's okay with you. So the way we look, our paid customers are the professionals. Okay, are the professionals such as RICS or RIBA, qualified professionals are people who are going to be essentially in our platform. They're the service providers. They are essentially the backbone of RelAi. Okay, we therefore rely on the professionals and hence on RICS and the standards they maintain, as well as other organizations such as RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects, to kind of ARB, etc., to kind of put in these stringent standards that the world looks up to. So these are the service providers, and the buyers and sellers, property buyers, sellers, and renovators, essentially then be the clients of our customers become our other side of the marketplace. Each time they will want to buy or sell a property, we want you to go through our platform, and we make it free for you guys as well. So if you want a little conservatory extension, if you want a little garage extension, conversion, loft conversion, the things that British public do on a day-to-day basis, either with the going into the housing ladder, getting the information out of it, the opacity that is in this fragmented, antiquated market. We are trying to solve that by bringing information to the fore, letting people talk to each other. So our typical ones at the moment, we think the buyers, sellers, and renovators, they're going to be tech savvy slightly, but we do think this is going to obviously over time, as you've seen the progress of mobile phones, obviously over the last 10 years, the smartphones, over time, it's obviously going to penetrate into the mainstream, so to say, in terms of, so there is no a typical customer, so to say, in my opinion, at the moment, although I think the initial ones are going to be the professionals who are tech savvy. However, the other thing that I think Claudia can talk better is offshore investors. Okay, so if you have offshore, if you are living in Britain today and you want to buy a property in Italy, or vice versa, if you're living in China and you want to buy a property in Britain or in America, and we buy something there or from here, whichever way you want to do it, whether you're an investor, whether your son or daughter is coming to study here, whatnot, and you want the transaction, what you can do is you can rely on RICS. And because you can rely on RICS, we are essentially working with RICS and RelAi and these organizations such as yours, to make it easier to bring your skills and to bring the standards to the fore, not just for the local population in UK, but for everyone else. So they go through that, standard and transparency, and access our professional services, quite frankly. I don't know, Claudia, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, if I just say, because we just wanted to add a few things. One of the key points of RelAi is that basically it's country specific. With experience and let's say having worked in different countries, we have studied the process through different countries. So the tool can be adjusted, and with a plug and play model, basically, it's easy for us to switch on tasks and functions. So it can be adapted, and it's country specific. So if you want to buy a property in Italy from here, for example, or in Spain, you can access the tool, get familiar with the process, because you don't have to be technical, you don't have to be a professional. At least you will understand what you have to do. And after getting an understanding of the next stage, you can basically talk to a professional in that country who is qualified, speaks your language, because you can always find a professional who has basically, because we ask which skills do you have, so when there's people who can basically speak your language in other countries, so it's going to be much easier for you to start the process and basically not get trapped in a process that can be very, very complicated. I mean, I've done this for work for years, and I have to say that for Monte dei Paschi banks and other banks, I've come to a situation that they can be scary for people who can really in other countries, not in its process. So this was one of the advantages of having a platform like this.
So it's an important point you raise, isn't it? Because for better or for worse, although houses are arguably broadly similar, perhaps across Europe, the process of buying and renovating and the kind of people you need to use are different, and the process is different. So it's good to hear that your platform will recognise that those local issues and allow somebody, arguably somebody living in London, to renovate an apartment in Siena or an apartment in Germany or wherever it might be, because there are so many local jurisdictional differences, aren't there?
That's possible, and we capture all that. And I think, in a way, as you shed more light, and I'm talking probably capital markets language here, in a way, as you make the market more and more transparent, if you look at the indices, or the more real estate indices and the measurements, UK market is it is by far the most transparent real estate market globally. Okay, so we are in a position where we can actually, there is a read across, from UK onwards, and I think in a way, and this is a capital markets language, I apologize in advance, the more transparency you create, the more liquidity you create.
Yeah.
And this liquidity, has a trickle-down effect. Okay, so you employ more people, you transfer money faster, you get the professionals involved, and you can take advantage of, in Italy, for example, there is a super tax or tax bonus, Claudia. Correct me if I'm not honest. Super bonus, so 100% of your work can be claimed back or something like that if you take people from local area. So there are all these paraphernalias that you see, in these markets, and we can show them a way. We can make that happen by bringing more transparency and creating more liquidity in the market.
No, and I suppose it's another good example where technology is here to simplify the process, not add complexity. Because I think there's always a danger that people think, oh, well, you're using all these complex pieces of technology, but actually it's about simplifying rather than adding complexity to the user experience anyway. So
absolutely, this process, Andrew, as you probably know better than us, Law Society had 71 steps in United Kingdom until a few years ago for the conveyancing process. That was the defined 71 steps. Okay, which is what the consultation was all about. A few years ago, then 2018, 2017. And we are not, whilst we are simplifying things, we are not compromising the legal steps. And that's very important for us, that we respect these authorities in law societies and RICS and whatnot, and the legal steps, whether it's in UK, whether it's in Italy, whether it's in US. We probably plan to, go into Israel as well. And perhaps you can understand from in emerging markets like India, there is a huge user case as well, where people are moving from the villages to the cities, and the migration is massive, and it can create a sort of a mobility. It could act as a mobility maker as well. So we are not compromising any of those legal statutes, if you see what I'm saying.
Process, the renovation process is not regulated by law, obviously, but it's at the same time is extremely complex anyways. Sometimes it's complex for professionals as well, like me. It's not always easy. So. And on the other side, the buying and selling process is regulated by law. So these steps, obviously, they're not going to be compromised. And also, I have to say that it's true that we bring in transparency with RelAi, but we also want to make sure that the process is basically customizable. So everyone will decide the level of involvement that they want in the process. Because we know that it's a very complex process, and also depends on case by case how people want to get involved. Or maybe some people will want just to have a look at the process, but not being involved in the first person. So it's very flexible, because we know that it's not easy to change, let's say, habits or perspectives, complex in one go. So people who don't want to do any change, but they want maybe to be involved, to understand what happens, that it's always good to see who is involved in the process and where we are, they can do it. People who want to do it on their own, they can. So it's very adjustable. It's very flexible, I would say.
And as you say, people can effectively grow into how much what they want to use the platform in that way. Yeah. Now, I suppose with renovation, you have in the UK, you have building control and gas safe certificates and planning permission, depending on what needs to be done. So even what can appear to be a simple task can still have quite a lot of regulatory and sort of oversight that's required. So, these things are never that simple. Well, it's been great to talk, and obviously it sounds like you have a busy few months ahead already to deliver on the first platform and keep working on these developments. So thanks very much for your time today, and I look forward to catching up with you soon when we can review how well things are going and look at progress. So great to talk to you both.
Thank you very much for having us.